It's down. It says
Down. Thanks. Okay. Why did I join? First, because I know you. And I was really very curious to hear all we have been talking about your work, but I'm really, really very interested and curious to hear about your dissertation, your PhD dissertation. And because of all this relating piece, I think it's very, very important, and that's what gets us together.
Thank you. So yeah, Nika just introduced a little bit about my work. I'm gonna present I'm now finishing my PhD dissertation on relational management, relational school management, and that's what I'm gonna talk about today, about how I did it, what my findings are, and where I'm at, and how, and I know you can contribute a lot after seeing my results. Dalia, how about you? Thank you, Nick.
Well, for three reasons. One, because the Xavier School is very, very interesting, and it's a very special example. Another reason is that we are presenting tomorrow, so I felt that it would be nice to establish some kind of contact since we're going to be in the same panel. But very importantly so, because I've been engaged in so much management in my career as at the university, as head of my department, as a dean, as managing projects, a lot of management, and some of it has been very successful, some of it has been very unsuccessful. So it's always a huge challenge, and I'm very interested to see, how you can do it relationally. And there are some very nice articles in the Handbook of Social Construction Practices on management, and I think these are nice examples that people that are here should look them up, because it's really a huge challenge. So I'm very interested to see how you've been doing it.
Thank you, very interesting. Who's missing?
I'll go very quickly. I'm here because you're my daughter. And again, I just couldn't miss the chance of seeing you present and see how you put everything together. And it's very exciting, but I also wanted to hear the findings of your research in a different context, that the way I've been hearing them, and also hear to what other people have to say about management and the work you're doing.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Priyanka, the ones that don't have the camera on, I'm still gonna mention you because I think you're here. But if you can, please open your camera because it's easier to relate that way. So Priyanka.
Yeah, sure. I'll just turn on my camera in a while. There's some internet issue at my place. I'm not getting very good connectivity. Yeah, my reasons for joining this breakout room were in my present profile as a mentor teacher with the Delhi government. I get to observe the school management, the way it works. So the topic got me interested into, I might pick up some nuances of how school managements work, and I'm sure your presentation would give me some insights into the latest that's happening in school management. I may be wrong, but these are the reasons I thought of joining this breakout room.
Perfect, thank you. I'm not sure if I'm going to give you answers or more questions, but that's get out with something.
That's the best.
Arun, are you there? Arun Bharti. Well, thank you for being here, and Preeti as well. I know you wrote in the chat. So yes, I'm finishing my dissertation on relational school management. I started, and I'm doing a case study about Xavier Educational Academy. I started my research focusing on relational education, on documenting a relational school model. And then I realized that it's not just about what happens inside the school, inside the classroom. It goes beyond the classroom. It goes with the administration and principals, directors, and even parents. It involves the entire school community. So I switched in the middle of the process to management, and it's been a very interesting and fun process that I'm about to finish, and I'm very scared to actually finish my dissertation because there's always a lot of things that are left out. Let me see if I can share here. There. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. So relational school management, the case of Xavier Educational Academy, that I think you've all heard about it during this 2 days. So what is management? Why don't you tell me what, like, when I talk about management or school management, what comes to your mind? I have some ideas in the presentation, but you can just drop at someone. Felix?
Yeah. Besides all the things that you have listed here, for me also management implies the construction of the culture, of the organizational, institutional culture. So it implies the way they behave, the way they talk, the way they act. You know, it's broader more than policies and practices. It's also the way they live, the day-to-day action in the school.
And I could call that kind of relational codes, relational experience. I don't have the right term for what Felix is talking about, but if I think a culture will be bigger, and I would like to mention the social climate could be, or the social environment that it's created.
Absolutely. The capacity building of this, everybody involved, you know, all partners involved, because that's very important, that they can get together and perform.
So it will be the capacity of each individual, or the capacity?
Or no, of the capacity of the group, you know, the capacity building in the group formation of all those involved.
Okay. Thank you, Priyanka.
I would just add one thing. I think it's also about taking ownership of the decisions you take and the work you do. So I think it's also about taking responsibility, taking ownership.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Any other ideas?
I'm curious why you've put down pedagogical strategies and curriculum development. Would that be part of it, of management?
Well, what I actually focus more on the pedagogical strategies than the administration part. Management, it involves a lot of things. How you see the little guy here orchestrating everything. Part of the management is administration and the financial part, that I'm not going into that part. But the other part of the management is pedagogical and curriculum development, because it's a way of managing human capital, that is the abilities and skills of the school workers that are like kind of the, because the management, the concept management comes from the world of business and the market. So when we translate it to education, in a way, the school workers are teachers and staff, but they work with like the stuff that, or the material, the raw material of the enterprises are students, in the case, if we translate it literally to school. So that brings me to the problem that I think is here. Yeah. So the problem is that the way the translation from the concept of management from enterprises to schools wasn't accurate, because they went from working with staff to working with people. And students are not staff, are not things that can be measured, and they are not in the graphs. And also the purpose of a business is to earn more money. The purpose of a school is not to earn more money. Some schools are businesses, but also, like, or parallel to the business objective, it's also the educational part. That's why I added the pedagogical strategies and the curriculum development, because it's part of the objective of the school. That for each school will be different, but in general is to learn. So schools want students to learn or want to create a community, or if we go back to the building of a nation, and we want to create citizens that are loyal to each nation. That was kind of the first objective of the school as an institution in general. But the concept of management comes from the business world. And our world, like, oh, I didn't ask you about this image, but what do you feel when you see this image? I was just assuming that you understand the same thing I understand.
It is a good image of how it shouldn't be done.
It's like a loss of the individuals, no? Like being an individual or being a person, it's suddenly lost in the way.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? What makes you feel?
Terrible. Terrible, like mincemeat. Like mincemeat.
Like running away.
Yeah, that's something that I think, Tamara, we discussed yesterday. It's the paradigm of success, which is based on the economy, based on richness, on wealth, and not based on the human part, the relational part, and the importance of who you are.
Exactly. So when we bring this relational part to management, the idea is to bring the humanity back, the human part. So here is my problem written out. I think it was more clear in an image. I'm more about visuals, but human relations and learning community building have been devalued by the modern paradigm of education, where the transmission of knowledge in progressive and linear way has been the focus of the educational agenda. I took this from a book that actually Talia was the editor. I don't know if you remember this part. Also, the modern world brought an obsession for efficacy and efficiency. There are words that come from the business world, and they brought them to the educational world. So now we talk about learning in an efficient way and having a quality education and having quality at schools, that it's not something easy to measure when you're talking about learning. And also the way results are measured, it feels like if something can be measured, it's not worth it. And a lot of the things that make learning happen, it's impossible to measure. Like if you think about when you learn, it's really hard to actually know when you're learning and how it happened. You kind of know later when you actually know you have that ability or that competence. And as I said before, school management systems are based on companies' management systems that deal with staff and not people. So educational organizations that deal with people should have a school management system that responds to human dynamics and not to a system that is linear and a process that takes you to at something concrete, that it's not how learning happens, how learning processes work. So seeing that
So process rather than output, right?
Exactly. So seeing that problem, I conducted a case study at Xavier Educational Academy that is an alternative private school for teenagers that for their physical, social, or psychological characteristics can learn and develop themselves in a traditional environment. So these kids, for some reason, the traditional environment or the traditional school system couldn't fit them, and they were expelled, or they expelled themselves from there. So Xavier philosophy of education is based on a relationship-based approach. So I started my dissertation documenting what goes on Xavier, and I wanted to create a relationship-based education model. So drawing from my experience working with students that for some reason did not make it into the traditional school system, I think I have to give you a little bit of background here. We created a school inspired in Xavier Academy in Mexico. So I worked at that school for 2 years, and we were developing the same model, but in based in the culture and the needs of Mexican students. So I worked with students that for some reason did not make it to the traditional school system. And I realized how a meaningful relationship can bring these students back to the learning process. These students, I say, bring them back because in a way they were out of the learning process in their life. They didn't like to learn, they didn't like school, so they thought that what they were doing at school was learning. So they kind of went out of the process and they didn't want to know anything about it. And they were also labeled. They were labeled as the kids that couldn't learn, or that didn't want to learn, or that they were a disaster, or that they couldn't behave. Too many labels. And when they came to us, it was really simple. The only thing I needed to do was to ask them what they wanted. How are they, in a sense, seeing them as a human, and also what they like. And I just, from there, it was so easy to talk about anything and to bring them back to learning because of the relationship. And I realized that this relationship approach goes beyond the classroom. It involves a building of a learning community that includes admin, parents, and school faculty. So if the environment, it's not a learning, if the environment it's not with the relationship in the center, it's really hard for teachers to do it with their students. Also, teaching in a relationship way, in a relationship-based way, it's not something you can learn in theory. So once teachers get it from the admin because they are treated that way, it's really easy for them to do the same with their students. They have to live it first, not to read it, not to see it. If they live that relationship-based model with themselves, it's easier for them to do it with their students. If they feel like the administration cares about them as teachers, they can care about their students. One of the things that the students at Xavier told me, most of them actually, was that they like Xavier because teachers care about them. And they really do. It has to be honest and it has to be genuine. So my hypothesis or rationale is that an institution where the learning experiences depend on the quality of the relationship should have a school management model that is congruent with its education philosophy, and the way acting and deciding should involve relational processes. My theoretical framework, it comes from an emotional crisis. The technological era, neoliberal ideas, and self-centered society, it created an era of loneliness and anxiety. And schools become that place where children go for support for this emotional crisis, Also because in the knowledge societies, the purpose of school changes. It's not the place where you go and get information anymore, because you get information from here. Like we all have the access to information. So now schools become a place to belong, a place where you learn how to relate to others and how to manage your emotions as well. And also teachers didn't get that part but when they were at school. So if they didn't learn this way, it's harder for them to understand how the kids nowadays can learn a different way. So again, they have to experience it in order to do it with the next generation. Also, the importance of learning of relationships in learning. Neufeld said that the lost kid can only be taught through relationship. So this is seen when in difficult cases, but it's actually really useful in any case, because we all need relationships in life, and we all need to be seen and to be heard. And management, school management systems are influenced by the political and social context. So the way schools have been managed, especially public schools, has been influenced by the political ideologies of each. At least in Mexico, it's each 6 years that we change the president and we change the political ideology that is managing the government. So that's influence in a political part, but also in a social part, the neoliberal ideas and a world that is driven by the business world also influences the way schools are managed. So the educational paradigms that I use in my dissertations are humanism. I use experiential learning and meaningful learning. Experiential learning addresses the needs and wants of the learner, and it's equivalent to personal change and work and growth. In this case of management, the learner, it's not always the student, because teachers are also learners, admins are also learners, like the entire community, each member of the community can be the learner and has wants and needs. And also previous knowledge and experiences. We all come with previous knowledge, and it's usually also, it's easier to build upon previous knowledge, but also it makes more sense. And when something makes sense to us and it's connected to whatever we have in mind, it's easier to create a learning experience and learning. And social constructionism, I think we're all familiar with this, but knowledge as action, contextualized knowledge, and dialogic learning. As you can see, they overlap. So humanism, like being human and having a humanism approach to learning, it goes very well with the social constructionism ideas. I conducted a qualitative research, phenomenological, hermeneutic, and a case study. So I did, before the pandemic, I started focus groups with students, and I decided to do it. Actually, at the beginning, I started with interviews, one-on-one interview, but they were very intimidated. And I realized that when I created the focus groups and they started a conversation, it was easier for them, and it came more natural to them to talk about their experiences. So in a way, I realized that my research had to be relational too, not just like if I'm researching in a relationship-based school and I'm talking about relationship-based management, my research had to be relational as well. And then the pandemic came, so the interviews for my teachers were through Zoom. And it's interesting to see that, because there's still connection through a screen. And while I was doing the interviews, I was also teaching. So it was a fun experience, and also it was very easy to connect with them, even through a screen. So these are my informants. There were students, teachers, the school itself that it involves everyone, that includes everyone involved, and the learning community. So these are the people that I interview: owner and founder, office management, high school principal, middle school principal, director of operation, history teacher, math teacher, biology teacher, 2 dads and 2 moms. But an also interesting thing about Xavier is that these are like the roles in paper, but actually how Richard, the founder, create these positions, these roles, is by the needs, abilities, and characteristics of each person. So when I was interviewing, they will say like, oh, officially I'm an office manager, but actually I do this, that, and that, and I love to do this, or I'm the mom of the school, or I'm like the uncle of the school. They also refer to their experience at Xavier as a family, or members of a family. So these are the students, the focus groups, and the age of the students. To analyze my data, I used an analysis of topics as a way of extracting the words participants used to describe their experiences. So I build the emotional and relational reality of the participants through their words. So I interviewed, I transcribed my interviews, and then I started playing with the words and the concepts. So of course, my reality is also impregnated in my dissertation. And then as a second level of analysis, I analyze the motivations behind the learning and teaching experiences. And I did a word cloud from each group of interviews and focus groups. This is the group of the teachers. So the word that was more repeated in these interviews was student. Then for the admin was school, but then in the second place, student and teacher. For families, it was son, but it's also very close to Xavier, teacher, community, school. And for the students, it was teacher. So I thought it was very interesting to see how students talked about their teacher and teachers talked about students and admin talked about the school. So in a way, the way they talk about their experience, they were relating in language. They were talking about how they were relating to others because they were mentioning others during the interviews. Actually, I'm going to stop here. What do you think about these results or these words? If you want, I can go on and to switch from one another. Felix.
Yes, thank you, Tamara, for your presentation. One of the things that came to my mind was when talking about leadership in school and designing the curriculum. Can it be possible that we have a relational model that can bring something like, I'm going to put it in the chat because I wrote it while listening, that at the end of the day the students can say, I know that I learn. It's empowering the students to say, I know that I'm learning at this moment. Then also be aware and knowing when and how I learn. It means, what are the best practices for me to learn. And finally, knowing what to do with what I learned. It's kind of empowering the students in their relation to also put their voices in the design of the curriculum. Because sometimes we have all the specialists, the teachers, psychologists, defining how the experience is going to be created in the classroom. But what about if we hear and we listen to the voices in the table and the students and let them say, this is how I know that I'm learning. This is the point, that indicator that tells me that I'm learning, and this is the best way for me. And after that, after the experience, I can discuss and have a discussion and know what to do with what I learned in the classroom. So I think if we can create this kind of relation or model, it will be more powerful, because then we are really in a constructionist, in the construction, social constructions,
So you're saying that that students should be aware of how and when they learn, so that they can take responsibility for their learning process.
That's my point, exactly. Not to be a passive actor in the experience, in the creation and designing of the experience, but also giving some insights and ideas how to create the experience in the classroom.
Perfect. Actually, a lot of during my interviews, students talked about how the teachers let them decide when they can learn, because at Xavier they have this flexibility when they can decide if they're not ready to learn history right now at this time, and they need to go to the music room and then come back. They have that flexibility. But also they talked a lot about that, the relationship between the student, the teachers and them, and they felt like they trusted them. And once they felt that trust from the teacher, that they knew what they were doing or how they can do it, it was easier. But yeah, I know what you mean, that to do it in the educational model. But if you put the trust in the middle, or the trust in the center, the relationship in the center, it's easier for them to understand that they can also choose, and they can also decide when they can learn and how they can learn. So I think it can go from there. I don't know if I'm answering what you were expecting.
Yeah, but I think it's what I'm trying to say, and also because it's inviting us to create a different paradigm in the objective and the final goal of the educational model. Because at the end of the day, if the experience is created only by one side of the table, then it's going to be influenced by what my definition of success is. So as a teacher, I have an idea of what success is going to be for you in the future. But what about your voice? What do you want to be in life? What kind of human being you want to be in life? So that's your definition of success. So let me listen to you, and let's co-create this experience, because at the end of the day, you are the one who is the one who is going to decide what to do with the experience, with the learning. The teacher has already learned, and the teacher is already, trying to. It's an adult, and it's what I mean. And the student is a person in process. It's a person who is creating the new reality for themselves. The students are creating reality. So I think it also invites to rethink about what the objective of the experience is at the end of the day. And I'm going to give the chance to Thomas, and I'll give you others. Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you.
I totally agree with you that we need time to do it, to do some kind of an evaluation of the education with the students. I have some examples from our school. We use a lot of sport, but it's not to learn sport, it's to learn something else about life. And that doesn't work if we don't evaluate afterwards. Talk, what did you experience in this class? What did you experience now? How can you use it later? Can you tell me what did you learn? Maybe it's not what I thought you should learn, but we have to make time to evaluate, not just finish the class and say, well, it's finished now, I've delivered what I should deliver. We have to invite the students to deliver.
Yeah, to create more space for reflection.
Yeah.
And also that's a way of putting the process in the middle, because it's not about having creating a result, but to create a reflection so that they can keep on learning. Also, an interesting thing about learning is that it doesn't have a beginning nor an end. Like it's not about something you start and you finish and then you get a diploma, as the way we have, like that was a human creation or a human structure, that we try to structure something that it's bigger when it's not structured, when it's unstructured. I'm gonna continue a little bit. Just
Tamara?
Yeah, go.
I agree with you that there's no beginning and end. That's why, Felix, I would tend to disagree that students are developing. Everybody's developing. The learners are developing, the teachers are developing, and the school as an organization is developing. So I think everybody's in development. But what I would like to ask Tamara is, because we're talking about management, so the school is an organization, students, besides learners, are somehow a part of that management, right? What do they do? Can you give us concrete examples of how students are part of the management, not only of the learning process, but as part of the management? How is there room for them to influence the way the school is managed? Are there active participants in the management of the school?
Well, as I said before, I focus on the management in a social way. So more about, they have agency about the curriculum development and the way they learn, and the way, they kind of guide the teachers to teach them in the way they need to be taught. And they also have agency in creating the curriculum. They get to choose and create the way they want, or the order they want to take their classes. There are some classes that are mandatory, because if they don't take them, they won't get a diploma. So there's a structure that is from the government, that it's from the system. So the school is inside a system that they have to kind of follow, but they have this flexibility, and that flexibility is not just for the teachers, but also for the students. So they get to manage the way they learn and the way the teachers taught them, and all the students have a personal relationship with Richard, with the principal and with the owner of the school. And that's possible because they are 150 students. So also yeah.
But is there some collective decision making, for example, collective, like the school? What would the students do if they're going to go on out of school on an excursion? Is there space for collective decision making, mechanisms for collective decision making? Is there some kind of board that students sort of get involved in dialogic processes collectively to make decisions that regard the school?
They are starting to doing that. They don't have a formal space or a formal board, but I know they do it informally because of the relationship. They feel with the trust to go with Veronica, with the office manager, and ask things. So like the school is open, like the relationships are all over the place. I don't know if that makes sense. Like they don't need to have a board because they know they can go up to Richard or Veronica or the teacher to ask what they need.
Yeah. So
So
in a
that-
way, to me, it sounds more than management. It sounds to me like that you're describing the dynamics in the school,
Yeah.
and in the way, you know, relationships and the way the different agents in the school, teachers, parents, learners, they form this learning community. I mean, in a way, what I hear is the dynamics of a learning community
Mhm.
more than a school management.
Yeah, that's what I'm describing right now. Actually, I think I went away from my research, but I started with that. That's what I wanted to explain here. So I started with meaningful learning, relationships-based learning. This is what I got from the interviews. Dialogic and collaborative learning. So it starts with learning, and learning goes beyond the classroom with community, family, and the way the school is managed. It's not just from the like top down.
Bottom up, sure.
But yeah, so the leadership, I describe leadership and relational management in a way. These are so some unfinished thoughts that I have is that management is a learning process. So this is why I was describing the learning process at the school, because the way management works, it's also as a learning management. It's also as a learning process, I'm sorry. And I'm also getting to an idea because that the management is liquid, as the liquid society of Bauman, that in a liquid society, the management can be as rigid as it is in the business world. And also meaningful learning process are not isolated experiences inside the classroom, rather than live experiences that include all parts of the learning community. So yeah, maybe you're right. How did you describe it as a learning community?
Me?
Well, what did you say that instead of management,
And I said that it's more the dynamics of a learning community. To me, you know, the whole thing is a learning community because everybody, all agents playing a part in that learning process. And it's more the dynamics than the management. I mean, I would shift away from the word management more than I would describe the dynamics.
Like going back to dynamics, that's very interesting. And also, I think like in this presentation, I focus more on the students because I was answering questions about the students, but another interesting thing was the relationship between faculty, between teachers, and how they describe the way the principal and the founder were using relational leadership skills that I still don't know how to name that type of leadership, because it's not like they do whatever, like they do what the situation calls for. Like it's about the situation and it's about the context, not just about what the experts say they have to do or they need to do.
Yeah, if you look at leadership styles, you know, the classic sort of social psychological leadership style, this is a very flexible leadership style that has to do with structure, but at the same time it has to do with content, and it has to do with feelings and emotional leaders as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, Silvia, you were raising your hand.
Yes, when I was listening to you, I was trying to put some, because I'm very visual, I was trying to put together the information and how all these characters play out the construction of what you were calling school management, and how all the voices are included in a very informal way, in a very fluid way. And I was struggling in trying to represent what you were trying to say in terms of how do we include all the voices in the decision making process, in the leadership, and in the way they are shaping each other as they are collaborating and having conversations with each other. So in that sense, I don't have a very well defined diagram, but what I have is this multiple conversations that are interacting with each other in order to make decisions together. But it seems like the structure, it's according to the context and not according to the role, and the structure shifts in each particular instance. So it will be more like circumstance-based management instead of role-relate management, and that is shifting as the problem arises or as a situation needs to be attended. There are shifts in hierarchy and in the way they are interacting with each other according to the particular situation. And that's sort of the image I get when you were talking about liquid management. I was in my head, I thought about fluid management and fluid structures. They're not fixed structure, but more like fractional or fluid structures that are interacting with each other according to the occasion. And that was the image I was getting when you were speaking.
Well, actually, Bauman talks about fluid more than liquid. I mean, we translated fluid rather than liquid, right?
Yeah, I think I translated it back, right?
I think it's more fluid.
I went to Spanish and then back to English. But yeah, the idea is that exactly that it's fluid, that it's not rigid.
Flexible, fluidity, flexible. Yeah.
And situational. For me, the biggest learning I'm getting from you is that this is according to the situation, and each particular situation will call for a different group of people that will be in conversation about the particular situation, and they will be constantly shifting.
Yeah, that's actually part of my proposal.
Can you give us an example, Tamara, of a failure in this management, in these dynamics? I mean, an example where things did not go well because, managing in a fluid way and always on the situation and not having preset structure, it's very hard. And obviously they do well at the school, but can you give us an example of failure and not of success?
I think that failure comes when people are disconnected and they're not, and also when power struggles come into place.
Yeah, but can you give us a concrete example of something that happened that did not work out well? Do you know of any?
Sure, I know.
Or some difficulties encountered. If you don't,
they're gonna get back to you. I'll think about one. I can't think about it right now, but I know there are a lot of examples.
But it must be very difficult. I mean, I'm sure that there have been many difficulties. That's why I talked about capacity building, especially instructors being able to do it,
It's exhausting. Like it takes a lot of energy because you have to be present all the time in order to.
And power, it's not something that you can eradicate.
Yeah, power and micropolitics are always like
you cannot eradicate.
But yeah, I'll think about it. Promise. Nika.
While listening to you, Tamara, I couldn't help thinking about, there is a mic open and there is a noise.
Tamara, am I coming through now?
No, and Tamara, so I was thinking about my traditional experience in going to school. And what you are proposing is really a change of paradigm that I think it's really, for me, the word management make a lot of sense, because it's not only giving space to students to talk about, it's also changing the way the administration and the teachers are looking at what's happening. So it's a huge change of paradigm, because if, as you said, the student can decide if studying history is the right time to do it, or can do it later, or has to go to the music room. But if the administration doesn't look at that, that's a bad behavior. So I think it's a whole change in how you really face education. And for me, the relational management make a lot of sense. So thank you for bringing this up.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. And we'll continue the conversation. Felix, we have 100 seconds.
Yes, just to thank you for all the conversations. Thank you all. And one question that I'm dealing with at this moment with my project next week is